everyone. Thanks for listening today. I'm Carrie, and I'm back to mediate the second EMC podcast with SD McMillan, founder and CEO of EMC Relocations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second podcast.
Yes, so this podcast today is going to focus on healthcare in Jakarta, a subject that is on every new expat's mind. We're joined with special guests today, and we'll get a chance to hear from them all individually in a few minutes. But first, I'll do some quick introductions. We have Sasha Bright, psychologist and director of Pondok Indah International Counseling. We have Rili Mamahit, international referral executive with Siloam Hospitals Group. And we have Dr. Stephen Graff, director and founder of Good Practice Clinic. So thanks everyone for joining us today. For first-time listeners, we're going to share some quick background information with you on the podcast. Most of you will recognize SD, a well-known member of the expat community here in Jakarta. And as I mentioned before, she's also the founder and CEO of EMC, a boutique relocations company. So SD, as the expert on all things EMC, can you please explain to our listeners a little bit about EMC and why you call it a boutique?
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, our company is a boutique relocation company. What does it mean? Well, we are a small company, and just like a boutique, we give very personalized attention to our clients. So prior to their arrival, we're sending a lots of emails with lots of questions, and we try to manage their expectations about Jakarta expat living, school, healthcare, and anything they ask, we try to answer as best as we could. We also offer orientation, settling in when they move in, and opening bank account, and driver's license. So we cater for each of your need, and so no cookie cutter solution. Everybody is different. So
right.
Yeah.
And that's actually what gave you the idea to start up the podcast, right? And this healthcare topic in general.
True, yes. We always have blogs in the past, and we publish monthly, and we probably continue again. But we decide to do podcasts, which is more interactive, and hopefully to give better information to our audience, to our clients, to anyone that will relocate to Jakarta. And we will publish that also on a monthly or 2-monthly basis.
That's right. So like Esty said, every couple of months we'll be bringing you a new podcast, and those podcasts will be highlighting the key elements of life in Jakarta. The goal of the podcast will be to help new families learn tips to get settled in quicker and to really find a community that they feel like they connect with. I know that one of the things that I was really eager to figure out when I was an expat that just arrived to Jakarta was the healthcare system. So for today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the overall healthcare system in Jakarta, how to navigate it with ease, and also how to access information and resources that are available. So we have our panel here, and I will be asking them some of the questions that are on all of the minds of new expats and arrivals when they first get here. And I think it's going to be really interesting, actually, to see the similarities and the differences between your replies,
exactly.
Given that you guys all cover different areas of healthcare in Jakarta.
Right.
So to start us off, could each of you please explain who you are and what you do to our listeners?
Of course.
You want to start us off?
Why not? Thank you, Carrie and Esty, for having me on. My name is Sasha Bright. I'm originally Dutch, and I've lived here now for a bit over a decade. I'm a clinical psychologist and a business and organization psychologist. I'm also the director of Pondok Indah International Counseling, as you mentioned, right, which is my private practice for psychological talking therapy. I see mainly expats and a handful of Indonesians here and there over the years. So I see individuals, couples, families, lots of children as well.
Interesting.
And that's kind of what I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, my full name is Rili Richard Mamahit. I am working for Siloam Hospitals Group, the nation's largest private healthcare provider. We have around 40 hospitals and clinics across Indonesia, from Sumatra to Papua. So for my job, I work as the international referral executive. working mostly with insurance and TPE or like assistance companies. And also I handle project with embassies or chambers of commerce. That's how I got to know ST, and also with some organizations. Thank you.
Hi. Well, my name is Dr. Stephen Graaf, and I have a primary care clinic in Jakarta. It's actually a premium primary care clinic. We have patients from, 78 different countries and an all English speaking team. And what is unique about this is that all of us only work at good practice. We don't work anywhere else. So which makes consistency in the care more likely.
Yes, well, thank you. And like we said, we're really excited to have a mix of professionals across the spectrum here in Jakarta. Right, Esti?
Yes, and I'm very happy that my good friend, personally and a professional level, able to join us tonight. And thank you, Steve, for joining our podcast, and to meet a new friend, Sasha, who, as you know, mental health is important. So Sasha agreed to join. So thank you.
You're most
And really, thank you. A new friend we met at the networking function and agreed to join with a podcast representing Siloam Hospital. So thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the next question, which is a big one. So really, if you want to tackle this one first, and we'll kind of go down the line.
Sure.
Can you please briefly explain a general overview of healthcare in Jakarta?
So thank you for the question. Well, to me, the healthcare service in Jakarta, right, it's quite complex to be described in one adjective, like bad or good, or like, it's because you see here that in Jakarta area, especially in the business districts, right, you can find like, good hospital with standard, right, with their equipments and doctors. But then if you just go like maybe 3 kilometers from that part, right, you can go to the densely populated area, and you'll see people there. I mean, like the public health centers are just struggling with the local demands, with the surveillance for HIV, for TB, and many others. So yeah, it's very, it's very hard to describe in one word, but it is what it is. That's what we have in Jakarta.
Yeah, complex is definitely accurate.
It is.
It kind of sounds like there are a couple of tiers of systems.
Right.
Generally, expats arriving wouldn't likely access the local systems.
Yep.
Is that okay?
I would say so.
Okay. So maybe Sasha and Dr. Stephen, you can explain a little bit about more what the healthcare that would be there for expats as an option.
Sure. I'm confident that it would that Dr. Stephen is more suited to give a bit of an overview, right? Being a doctor, seeing all sorts of different kinds of patients, because I'm a little bit more specialized in mental health. Maybe I can round us up, Doc?
Sure. I mean, you have the private sector and you have the public sector. For sure, expats will use the private sector. That is very common for most expats here. But you need to know a little bit about the public sector. So as an expat, I would advise you to identify the nearest health center that is located near you. We call it Puskesmas. It's a health facility which is set up by the government. And why do you need to know this healthcare center? Most likely because you will have staff, and those people, the people who work with and for you, are most likely to use the healthcare centers as a first port of call. I think it's also very important that you make sure that everyone that you know in your household staff holds the national insurance, which is called BPJS, because it entitles them almost, to free healthcare. So it is really important that you make sure that they have this BPJS insurance. If you're unsure about, how they should enroll, you can just drop us a line and we can give you a simple algorithm which will show them how to apply for BPJS, this national insurance. The other thing that is important to know is that the healthcare system in Indonesia is a closed system. So it is run by Indonesian doctors who are educated in Indonesia. And even for Indonesians who have a medical degree from abroad, it's not always very easy for them to obtain a license to practice. So be aware of that. The other thing that I would say is that, being a primary care physician, try to find a clinic that your family and yourself can go to with all your questions you have, and just make sure that they understand the language you speak. I think that is really important.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful. And so it definitely sounds like one of the key factors in that is location, knowing local and private for your household staff and also for your family. So Esti, how does that factor in when your clients ask you for healthcare assistance as part of your orientation programs?
Yeah, again, being a boutique relocation company, we always listen, and when they ask for orientation, we try to ask what is the one they want to focus first. Sometimes they want to focus more on schooling, or sometimes they have health issue and they really need to talk to doctor about it, what is possible if in terms of drugs, in terms of treatments, and all of this. So normally when they request that, I always give Steve, I'm coming with the client. Please take care of our client. So that's give us a peace of mind that I can refer to Steve very easily for any questions. And now knowing also Sasha for anyone that require mental health, and also navigating hospital in Jakarta could be difficult for expats. So knowing, contact really, and so that again give me a peace of mind when we do orientation.
Yeah, I think a big portion of our audience will probably be hopefully investigating this before making a move to Jakarta. So this next question is really geared for them. What would you say, and we can start with you, Dr. Steve, would be a step to take before you come to Jakarta in terms of medical health care?
So I think people need to realize that Jakarta is not known as a center of medical excellence. So if you have any complicated medical issues, make sure that the specialists that you require are available in Jakarta or in the region, because this can be a challenge. The other thing is I advise everyone to make a list of their medication, because you can take medication in your home country, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is available under the same brand or at the same dose. So, easy is that you just write to our pharmacy, for instance, and ask them like, okay, this is my medication. Is it available in Indonesia? We're quite good at giving replies in English in a timely manner. And that would help, because it's really important that is my medication available? Are the doctors that I need to see available? If not in Jakarta, whereabouts in the region? And how easy is it for you to organize?
Thank you.
Yeah, very well said. I think one of the wonderful things that you're doing here is to emphasize the importance of a network, right? That you know where to go, ideally before you need your network. Right, so before you actually make the move here, whether you're still considering or not, and it's something we don't always want to think about, but healthcare is important, right? Because sometimes things can go wrong and we don't like to think about those things. But if we need it, we need it, right? And you're moving to an enormous city, right? It's very well known as the capital city of Indonesia. Some people might move to Bali, things like that, but your expectations might be high, right? You can find the world's best restaurant,
Exactly.
but when it comes to healthcare, it might be very different. Right, and particularly maybe for mental health care, which is sometimes, unfortunately, we don't want to use one adjective, but maybe even more limited. Right, so when you consider going somewhere, and whether you have pre-existing conditions, whether you're reliant on medication, or maybe your family is, or on counseling or anything else, right, or there's a risk factor in your family, that you take this seriously, and it's a priority that you go, that you come here and either beforehand, right, by example, listening to this podcast, or as soon as you arrive, try to make a network, right? So get acquainted, get out there and see what kind of other expats, what kind of information do they have, what kind of app groups are there, usually through embassies or international organizations. International schools are usually very well connected, and they also understand the importance of knowing where to go when you need it, right? So in an emergency or just for a certain care, that you don't take it for granted that you will get the same kind of care or medication or professionalism, unfortunately, that you would get in the place where you come from. And being aware of that doesn't make it a terrible thing, but it's more of a personal responsibility here than maybe where you're from, right? So it's not the usual steps that you follow. And if you can navigate well, you can find proper healthcare, but you need to know that things are a little bit different here than elsewhere.
Yeah, great response from Dr. Steve and also from Sasha. So I'm just going to add some technical, from that. So I think for an expat to come to Jakarta, they really need to know where they are located, right? Because knowing that the traffic here is, I'm really sorry to say, but it's very bad, especially during the working hours, right? So you really need to know, like, if you live, let's say, in southern part of Jakarta or northern part of in downtown Jakarta, right? Because let's say when you need emergency, then you have to locate. At least you need to leave to a close hospital, right, or a clinic, right, that have medical equipment that you need. And then secondly, I think from the financial perspective, you also the experts need to know whether their company do self-insure them, like just partner with a TBA and then do all the payment to the hospitals, or do the companies that sponsor them have insurance, right? So at Siloam, we have the privilege to partner with insurance. So as of now, we have around 60 non-Indonesian insurance partners from the States. If I can mention some names here, if it's okay. Yeah, like Cigna International, Blue Shield, and from America, and also from Helix from the UK, and many others, right? So you really need to know that, because not many of them have partnered with the hospitals or the clinics here. On that way that you, I think that you really want to have the cashless service, right? So you just give your card or the guarantee of payment, and that's it, right? And then I think on a personal level, if some of the expats have a chronic condition, for instance, like just take my own example. I have an allergy issue, right? And I think to find an allergist immunologist here is not that easy. Sometimes in one hospital, they barely have one. I think, like, let's say in Banten province, which is just, in the western part of Jakarta, right? For the 30 million people, they only have like 2 to 3 rheumatologists. So you can imagine that. And I think I've searched, like, here in Jakarta, probably for a type B hospital, like, a good hospital one, they only have like probably 1 or even 0 rheumatologists. So you really need to find that, right? If you have this kind of condition, you need to find that. We call it here Center of Excellence. So a hospital usually has that one.
Related to the previous question, but now let's imagine that our person who's prepping to come is actually here. They've arrived on the ground. What would you say is the most important first step in terms of putting a plan into place in case there's a medical emergency? So they're here. What should they do? Who wants to tackle that one first? Sasha?
Sure. It's, again, a little bit more specific for me, right? Because emergencies usually are things like anxiety attacks, panic attacks in public, self-harm, and suicide attempts, right? So things that are considered emergencies, right? So and sometimes people contact me for this, right? For the kind of care. But unfortunately, there's also quite a few different cases where people don't know where to go, right? These are things that can take you by surprise. These are things that can happen to loved ones that we then want to help. It can happen to somebody in the office, right? To somebody, we never know when to expect emergencies anyway, right? But sometimes it's even harder to find somebody specifically catered to that, right? So in that case, unfortunately, yes, it is a priority for the Indonesian government to continue to expand health and health coverage throughout the country, right? Even though most expats will find themselves in Jakarta, maybe Bali, things like that for their work, where there are good services around, good hospitals. Mental health care services are still, let's say, a little bit of just a handful maybe. If you would Google it, right, which most people would do, and in Jakarta you get you get a couple of hits of Indonesian clinics, so run by Indonesian people, and just for fun, I've written them all once in English and then again in Indonesian, and haven't gotten a response back.
Wow.
Right, so not in an emergency, but right, that shows that it's sorry for that, but I'm happy to say, which is, it kind of comes back to my my previous kind of story, get connected, right? Because there's a lot of people here who are in exactly the same situation you are, or they were last year, right? And they got acquainted very well, and the networks here of particularly expats are fabulous, particularly now after COVID. People are very well connected. You can ask them for anything. Right, to get the right kind of shade of nail polish to go with your dress. I'm saying that because it happens a lot, but also to find a medical professional or a good hospital or many other things that the experts are interested in, right? And also things where there's people who realize, oh, there's a risk factor in my family, right? I know that one of my children have been harming themselves, and this is something that might reoccur under stress, like moving to a new country. Right, and a lot of people have gone through the same thing. It's not something we usually talk about, but when we address it, when we say, hey, we have a certain need, people are very happy to help and to respond. So it's a little bit more your personal responsibility to have a network of people that you know, that you trust through schools, expert communities, and things like that, or some professionals as well that have a good network that you trust, right, that you know from the beginning. That you have to rely on, rather than saying, okay, I go, something is up and I know I'll call 911 or 112 or something like that. It's a little bit different here. The network is there, but it's more on a personal basis, right? So in case of an emergency, particularly that refers to mental health, it's good to know if it's not that serious. It's good to have a phone number in your telephone that you can ring of a professional, perhaps like myself, or from a good clinic or a hospital, or even a trusted loved one. If there's a bigger risk factor like suicidality or something, it's good to have people around you that notice about you, right? So this is the people in your children's school are aware of the situation, or at your work, so they can assist in case of an emergency, right? And that's sometimes a bit of an icky thing to do, right? To share very personal things, but you have to realize that that's one of the safest ways of accessing the help in case of an emergency.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think that ST and EMC also provide a lot of information that is actually almost beyond their scope or regional scope, right? Because I know a lot of people come to you with all sorts of questions.
All sorts of questions.
And actually the same happens to us because like you, we give highly personalized care. So when someone is sitting in our clinic and says, oh, I don't know where to take my child on a Sunday. I don't know of any parks. We will try and think with them and say, oh, do they like this or do they like that? Or, and that is part of the perks of my job. Yes. Because like you, we have a personal relationship with our patients. And that is just because we're a small team. We all speak English. We all like newcomers because we all know the city quite well, like you do, right? And we are very happy to share that knowledge because it may sound a little bit crazy, but I really love Jakarta, and I want everyone who comes to live here in Indonesia to enjoy it as much as I do. And I only agree with what you say. I guess it's about your network, which is very important. Try to figure out, where do you live? Is it South Jakarta? Okay, are there any preferred hospitals around my house? Are those hospitals used by other expats? I don't know. Find on Google what people write about these places. It's all very simple. And when you have the time, you don't have to be sick or ill. Just visit those places. and have a chat. We see a lot of expat families who, who are not ill, but they just want to meet. Oh, who is this Dr. Stephen? Or what is his team like, etc. And we are very, very happy to actually, welcome those people. And they don't need to become our patients because everyone, has a different preference. Some people like to go to a hospital, right? And some people prefer a small clinic. It's all a personal choice, but you do have to do your searching a little bit.
Right. Just want to add some points from that. So I think the first step that you also need to do is to be familiarized with the system itself. I mean, like in Jakarta in general, right? For instance, like in the US, because I studied in the US for my master's degree. So in the States, like for outpatient services, it's mostly done in doctor's office, right? Not in the hospital. So here is like a clinic, right? But here, like in the hospital, you can have both the outpatient and inpatient and emergency services. So that's a difference because there most people go to the hospital only for emergency or inpatient services. And secondly, and also it's critically important that you also need, I think this is what Dr. Steve has also emphasized, the capability of the hospital or like the clinic, right? Are they able to speak English, right? Because unlike our neighboring countries like the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore, right? I think most of the people there, they are able at least to speak basic English, right? But the case is not like here. In Indonesia. So you do really need to know, do these hospitals or clinics, they have staff, medical personnel that are able to speak English, right? And secondly, apart from us language capability, also their ability to communicate with third party, right? Suppose that you have an insurance, right, and you have the insurance doctor that they want to have the correspondence, right, and are they ready to the operations people to respond to their doctor, let's say in France or in the UK, right, to report back with the medical report? Are they able to do that? Do they have the capability to do that? So that's the thing also that they really need to know and to understand. That's from my thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really complete answers. We appreciate that. So if we were to summarize kind of the last couple of questions, it would be highly recommended to prepare your medical information and your needs before you come to the city. Have a general idea of where the healthcare locations are even before you come to Jakarta. And then when you do actually arrive, don't just rely on an emergency number or having something on your fridge like a magnet. Actually do the legwork yourself. Go meet the doctors and the staff where it's possible. Put that plan in place for your family. Build that plan. See it out yourself. And obviously that'll give you peace of mind, but it also means that when something does go wrong, or if something does go wrong, you have a plan in place and a network that you've built up so that you don't have that panic moment. Because we all want to try to avoid that moment.
Yes.
So, yes. Okay, so thank you again. We'll move on from emergencies. So let's talk a little bit about specialist care. I know we've touched a little bit on it, but let's talk about specialist care. If I was here, where would I go to find a specialist, and do I need a referral? Do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So in Indonesia, for a specialist care, it's usually on outpatient basis. So you just need to go to basically to a hospital, to the outpatient clinic there, and then you can meet, let's say, your allergist, immunologist, your rheumatologist, or surgeon. But definitely, some expats also do prefer to go to a clinic first, right? And that way they will be directed to see a specialist. But in most cases, in Jakarta, right, it's pretty general that people just go directly to see a specialist rather than going through a primary physician.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I'm very passionate about primary care, and I believe that any good referral comes from a primary care specialist, because primary care specialists, they have the medical knowledge to decide with you who to see. So, you can have pain in your chest, but it doesn't mean that you have to see a cardiologist. It really depends on what the cause is. So I prefer that someone actually comes to talk to one of us, and that we will decide together which specialist is best for you. And usually, we choose people who are in close contact with us. So they can be in any hospital, but we choose people who actually, react to our WhatsApp, pick up his or her phone when we call them. And this can be inside Jakarta, but it can also be outside Jakarta, because we want to make sure that the best care is provided for our patients.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Indonesia has all sorts of different types of care. Right? We started by saying it's a bit complex, right? I also like to look at it as a little bit of a free-for-all, right? And meaning that you can you make an appointment directly, if you manage, with a very high specialist, right? Somebody who is very specialized in something, and you imagine that's the person I need. That's also very much what the Indonesian people do themselves, right? I have a bit of a cough. I don't want to see anybody else than a cardiologist or something like that, right? Because I want to have the best of the best. But right, it's when you are experiencing symptoms, right, whether they are mental or physical, you are in need of care, right? You're in need of help. And help isn't only having a specialist doctor listening to you and doing all sorts of scans and the most expensive, most comprehensive treatment. It's also having somebody thinking along with you. Right? As Steven said that, okay, why do you want to go to this doctor? Because you might be wasting your time. You might have to end up somewhere completely different. In the case that you don't need a referral, you can just make a telephone call, and then if you find a doctor and then it's in this hospital and you can find a schedule, you can make an appointment, right? Clogging up waiting lists and things like that, if you really don't have to go there. And sometimes it is very helpful to have again, an important network, right, that you can rely on to say, okay, I'm experiencing symptoms, or somebody in my family is experiencing symptoms, or there's an emergency, and I have somebody that I can trust, professional. Right, you can say, okay, I have this doctor that I know, and a primary physician knows a lot about a lot of different things. Right, they might not be able to provide the specialist care, but you do, in 90% of the time you don't have to go there. Right, so using your network of trusted professional, holistic care, that's what that is. Right, we are all good. Proper advocate for that, right? That you go to somebody who can actually also help you think along, and if you need a specialist or you really want to, they can refer you to a trusted one, right? Because otherwise you just look at the doctor with many letters behind it. I have so many titles, and I want to have that one, and I have to wait for a very long time. I have to go to this particular hospital, and it's a bit of a goose chase. Well, somebody that actually knows what they're talking about can help you. Or if in my case, right, there's not that many options. There's not that many referrals. Well, I get quite a few from Stephen, which is nice. But many of them are from expat organizations like international schools and things, and perhaps to this podcast, international app groups and things for people who have had a good experience and said, look, I know somebody, and then I can describe a little bit what the experience would be like, and this is a personal referral rather than from one doctor to another, right? And sometimes they can be very valuable as well.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah,
but I also like to refer to you because I know you, right?
Yes, exactly.
You will always react to whatever question I have, of course, which I find really reassuring for the patient.
So it goes back to that trusted network, having that trusted network.
That's a big part.
And it is interesting or good to know, I suppose, that you can bypass a system that I think, coming from a Western country, we're all pretty familiar. Usually, you go to your primary care doctor, you get a referral. And I think someone mentioned it as well. It's probably important to note that even though you can do it, it might not be advisable because of healthcare or health insurance.
Sure.
Thoughts as well, depending on what country you're coming from.
Sorry to interrupt there, but sometimes the health insurance providers want you to go from step to step, right?
They require that referral.
They call it.
Absolutely.
Right? But it also, in many cases, you don't need to go and see a specialist, right? And I think a big part of our emphasis on that is that if you have a trusted professional, a primary doctor, they can help you with that. Most of the time, they can already solve it, take your worries away.
You could stop there.
Or otherwise refer you to somebody that they trust. Right? Which will really help you along. And that's a small step. You always go to the same place, familiar face. They might know you already. They know your history. It helps.
Right? Absolutely.
Sounds as if you're part of our team,
Secretly, yes.
Okay. So I know you've touched a little bit. I want to focus specifically on mental health now.
Yes.
So if you could outline for our newcomers to Jakarta some of the pitfalls. I know, again, we've touched a little bit, but some of the common pitfalls that might trigger some big feelings, or might cause some stress. Moving to a new location is already kind of stressful for some people.
Yeah.
So what specifically about Jakarta might be something that people should be aware of?
All right. Yes, very good. Right, and we're talking about expectations here mainly, right? If you are going to move somewhere that's usually a stressful life, right? And if you have pre-existing conditions, if you don't really handle those things so well, you should be aware of that. But mental health issues are everywhere, right? So there's nothing particular about Jakarta that says, okay, there is a risk factor. And I agree with Stephen, and probably you as well, that it's a wonderful place to live. And if you are prepared well, you can get so much out of it, right? But preparation is important. And one of the things that I experience quite regularly, which is, I think, relatively unique to Jakarta, if I believe most people's stories, is this particular scenario, in that an expat family moves here, right? And they don't usually do the preparation very well, like listening to his podcast, right? So good on you. And they come here and they have certain expectations, right? Maybe they visited Indonesia and they've been to Bali and it was all wonderful. And now you're coming to live in Jakarta. Most expats do, right? And there is traffic and there is pollution and there is all sorts of things that people didn't really expect. So their expectations are not really met. And particularly this scenario of people who often end up on my couch is a family where one of the partners is working here, right? They have a very high position, so they work many hours, many irregular hours. They have to travel a lot. They're from home a lot. The other partner, is not allowed to work, right? Which is something that you should realize. Many of the a lot of the volunteer work isn't even really allowed, right? So, and they find that they're kind of stuck in a giant house, right? The entire household is being taken care of by helpers. The kids go to the best private schools, and at home they're being taken care of by the men, right? And you have a wonderfully beautiful big house, very empty, and you sit next to your pool, and it's very hard to just go for a walk or bicycle ride because of traffic conditions. It's not always that easy to connect with other people if you're not a little bit proactive, and you don't have anybody to complain to, right? Because everybody else back home is working 9 to 5 and they're stuck and they don't want to hear about you, how tough life is, that you're sitting next to your pool in your paradise here. Right? But it can be a very loss of purpose, loss of meaning in their life for what we like to call trailing spouses, right? So the partner that travels along and finds it's very difficult to make friendships if you're not really proactive, you don't really go out. And people underestimate how much of an impact that has, right? People who, the one partner loves it here, they're having the time of their life, and the other person is crying on the couch every day because they have lost their sense of purpose, right? I usually gave up my job back at home, so my partner could work here. I also kind of lost my role as a parent because everything is being taken care of and life is wonderful here, but I'm just not really seeing it. Right? So that's the expectation management, which is what we're doing here. That, again, you have to really make something out of it, and then it can be such a wonderful place to live, with all of its quirks and everything. But that's something that I see quite regularly, specifically when new waves of expats come in. And as we talked about before we started recording, is that as an expat, you're usually here temporarily, but also it means that most of your friends are expats, and they're here temporarily, and your children's friends are here temporarily, and they move. And you think, okay, I knew this already. But you make very close friendships with these people because you live under these conditions, right? Because you live here temporarily, and you want to make the best out of it. And people move a lot more than would be back home. Right? So that's what I get to hear a lot.
Yep. Thank you. Did you have anything you'd like to add, really?
Sure. Just some technicalities here. So for expat, some of the pitfalls there, like you think that you need to be familiar and just to accept like the daily Jakarta, right? Yes. For instance, for your mental condition, like I took an Uber from Tangerang to central Jakarta, and it took me I think 3 hours for only 30 kilometers, because it can be so stressful, right?
Yes.
So on that part though, like, but sometimes you just have to accept it. As the French people say, c'est la vie, that's life, right? And that's life in Jakarta, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you just have to accept it. That's it, right? Yeah. And then secondly though, if you're from, Western society, I used, when I studied in the US, I just, answer a very, just a usual, answer to my professor. It was like, excellent, wonderful, right? That's super. But here, just to be honest, people would compliment you when, this is just culture, right?
Yeah.
When something that's phenomenal, it happens or you achieve it, right? So, for your mental health, sometimes for people, let's say when you report to your boss and your boss, okay, good. And then you're like, wow, I've been doing this for nights. How come you always say it's okay, right? Because like in Western cultures, like excellent, great job, wonderful, right? But not actually. That's not the culture here, right? That's from the office point of view. But on daily basis, sometimes people suggest cut to the chase, right? Not be a little bit diplomatic. Hey, could you please do this? In our the way we deliver things, in our language, right? So just be mindful of that, right? That there's a, cultural issue that plays there, right? So it's not that they don't want to appreciate people. No, in their heart, we are all humans, right? We want to appreciate people, but they are not just that expressive, right? To say things, right? To compliment you. So that's the thing. Oh, and you may think, oh no, she's disappointed with me. That's not the case actually, right? So yeah, you really need to probably reset the expectation when you arrive in Jakarta. That's for me.
Interesting.
Well, a few words about mental health. I would like to say that our team at Good Practice is very familiar with prescribing medication for mental conditions. This could be something like depression, anxiety, or addiction even. And that is quite rare in Indonesia, but our team is quite comfortable in prescribing those medications. And they're also quite comfortable in discussing your case or your mental health with, for instance, our psychologist, our UK-trained psychologist. So that is someone else than Sasha, although I work very well with Sasha. But we also have a UK-trained psychologist in our own clinic. And we also like to communicate and correspond with psychiatrists abroad. That is not an issue. So you should be aware that it is possible, but English-speaking therapists are rare, are very rare. You should also, you cannot just turn up and say, oh, now I want to see a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. We really need to search who is the appropriate person for you to see, because it's not as easy as it might be in your home country.
Just want to add some to it. So in Jakarta, this is just like in Indonesia, like for mental health, it's still like kind of like stigmatized. So they kind of like categorize, even like, the government like programs, it's like almost the same with the HIV programs and also the TB, where most of the services are actually carried out by the government hospitals, right? Like for instance, I am from Siloam, right? And across our 40 units, I must admit that we do not have a center of excellence for psychiatric, services. But what we actually do, like let's say our unit here in downtown Jakarta, that's called MRCCC, Mohtariadi Comprehensive Cancer Center. While we don't have, a center of excellence of mental health issue there, but we do have the psychiatrists and psychologists, because we do not only think about, of course, primary care is important, right? But for the tertiary care, think about those patients with palliative needs, right? Those with end-stage cancer, they also need, psychiatric consultation, right? So that way, the oncologist will also consult the patient with the psychiatrist. So that's what the hospitals here do mostly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've covered medical emergencies. We've discussed specialist care. We've discussed mental wellness in Jakarta. So we'd be remiss if we left out pediatrics. What kind of supports are there in Jakarta for children? Who wants to take that one? Dr. Steven?
Well, although in my team there are no pediatricians, so all of us are family medicine doctors, I believe that still 80% of all pediatric cases can be handled in primary care, as long as you know your research, if you know your guidelines, etc. The advantage is, of course, that people have easy access to us. So you will always see the same faces. You will always have an answer when you want to speak to the doctor, or email the doctor, or even video call the doctor. That is our big advantage. And sometimes you have to use time as a diagnostic tool. So we might not know everything on the first visit, but we can certainly do proper follow-up to make sure that everything is going in the right direction. But yes, if you need a specialist, right? If you need a specialist pediatric care, then we will look closely together with you where you should go. Is this like a respiratory issue that is causing your problems for your children? We will find someone who can deal with that. Is it something that is so complex? Then we will probably say, okay, maybe you need to seek an opinion in Singapore, which is the nearest center of medical excellence. But I think the key is proper communication with the parents. Expectations, find out, what do you want? What is your concern? And if they tell us like, oh, but we want to see someone in the hospital, we will ask why, and what did you have in mind? Do you want to be on the next plane to Singapore, or do you want to see someone here? And we can work it out together. As long as you have a good relationship with your patient, and if they think that you are a trusted medical practitioner, then it will all go well. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I just wanna add some because Dr. Steve, I believe, so we covered the primary care of for children, right? So I believe Jakarta, the government also has many to offer for children, right? There's a big government hospital, the Rumah Sakit Ibu dan Anak Harapan Kita, which is like our hope hospital for mom and kids, right? But I can't speak much of that because it belongs to the government, and I'm from a private sector.
Yeah.
So nevertheless, for instance, at Siloam, let's say somebody, a baby is born at MRCCC, the hospital in Semanggi, right? And they don't have a neonatologist, right? So that's the beauty of us having this 41 network. The one that we have in Kebun Jeruk, Siloam Hospital Kebun Jeruk, that one they have the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, right? So let's say when the baby has some issues, right? And then the pediatrician, the general pediatrician, will make a call to the neonatologist, who is the pediatrician that who took like a 2 to 3 years fellowship in the care of neonatology, right? And we transfer them to the to Siloam Kebun Jeruk that can provide them with the NICU. So yeah, that's the thing from the tertiary perspective. That's from me.
Thank you.
Okay, for me, a little bit of a side note, of course, because it's a different kind of care, right? Thank you for having me. But most expats will find themselves in Jakarta, maybe Bali, or maybe one of the other bigger cities. And as you know, they have quite a few very good international schools. Many of them have school counselors, which are usually also expats, right? So people have degrees from outside who speak English and some other languages as well. They don't all do, but most of them do, right? So a lot of the care that your children might need in terms of mental health support, if it's has to do with school and school choices and things, and then even some kind of mental health support actually can be covered by schools. But the most important thing is that what these schools have is, again, good connections. Right? So speaking for myself, I have connections with quite a few international schools in my area. Right? My practice called Pondok Indah International Counseling. Pondok Indah is in South Jakarta. It's the area there. And there's Jakarta Intercultural School, New Zealand School, many of the other ones, which have counselors themselves, but they have a network. Right, so like a short list of people that they know personally, that they have good experiences with, that they have had interviews with. Stephen and I go on a tour usually at the beginning of the year. We get invited to give this kind of talk as well to get people familiar with the healthcare system, the mental healthcare system in Indonesia, so they have a familiar face, so they know where to go, they have contacts, not just for ourselves, but to express, okay, where do you live, which is the closest place, to help people out with these kind of questions, and a bunch of many other questions as well. But through the school, of course, it's a very good start for looking after care for your children, also more specialized care. Right, so if there's medication, if there's allergies, but also a certain need for therapy, for example, through your school they can go through the shortlist and give a couple of recommendations and say, look, we know these people personally. We know we have good experiences with them. They work very closely together with our school psychologist, with our school counselor. So that's usually kind of what the network is like for care for the youngsters.
Okay, great. This has been wonderful. I feel like we're getting a lot of insider information today. So last question. I'd like to get your contact details. How do we call you or your office? And any of your replies will be put into the video details for the podcast. So maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Stephen, and then we'll go down the line.
Okay, so if you want to contact me, you contact ST and EMC.
Oh, there you go.
Well, you know, the name of our practice is Good Practice. So if you, the abbreviation would be GP. So we are also your general practitioner. So you can reach us by phone. 021 is 718-3140. Or you can drop us a line via email, info@goodpractice.co.id. But we also have a WhatsApp, which is 085772721119. For those who decide to become our premium member, well, the benefit is that you will have 24/7 access to our medical team. You can even call me 24 hours a day, and we will help you. And we will also help you when you're stranded in Bali or in Sulawesi on a diving holiday. We will guide you, where to go, what to do, etc., which can be pretty handy. And I guess one more rule of thumb is the further away you go from Jakarta, well, let's say the quality of care in Jakarta is the best, for sure. I think everyone agrees. So the further you are away from Jakarta, the more of a challenge it will be.
Good point.
Yeah, and then the importance of personalized care comes in again, right? Right, to know where to go, to have a familiar face or voice on the phone, right? Same goes for me, right? So I find it very important to have to be able to help people as best we can to have a personal connection, right? And maybe in mental health, it's even more important to have a comfortable connection where you can talk about the most personal things, right? To be in order to help people. So yeah, you can. My practice, we have a website, we have an email, right, which is me. That's Sasha at PI International Counseling. It's very long, but very catchy. And you can call or WhatsApp 08788532290, which again is me. Right. So, but I always tell the people that come in for the very first time, it's always to see, do we have a good connection? Do we have do I think I can help you? If I think I can, if I think I'm the right person, of course I will do whatever I can. Right. Which also means that people can, at any time reach out, right? In case there's an emergency, in case they just want to share something like a success or I'm having a particularly bad day. I always like that because people are not just coming to me for that 1 hour where we chat and I'll see you again next week, but they translate the things that we talk about into their daily lives. So I also really like it if they keep personal contact with me. So you wouldn't get a receptionist or anything else. You just get to talk to me. Right? So sometimes I have to admit I have a 3-year-old. I can't always reply right away, but I always intend to, and I really like it if people reach out personally.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah. For me, so I'm working actually in the business part of the hospital, right? And keep in mind, we have 41 hospital units across Indonesia with more than 10,000 staff members, like the nurses, specialists, and others, right? So yeah, of course, yeah. You can contact me for my WhatsApp number, right? So it's 081523 656613. And also, of course, my email address is my name, really. .mmhit. I think you can put it there on the podcast later. And
Absolutely.
At siloamhospitals.com. So for emergency, actually, we have the centralized number. It's 1500-911. So the beauty of it is like when you call it, right, they will locate you to the nearest Siloam unit, 20 or 30 kilometers at the maximum, right? If not, that they will recommend you to find another, ambulance. So yeah, so if you contact me, I'll try to liaise you with our, which the department that you need to talk to, right? For instance, like when you need an assistance in Bali, right? We do have the BIMC in Bali, BIMC hospital Ubud, and clinic in Ubud, and then the hospitals in Nusa Dua and in Kuta, and also the Siloam Denpasar. So yeah, I'll just connect you with them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So as we wrap up, was there anything that you feel like maybe we didn't get to say or that you wanted to add to let our audience know?
I think actually Dr. Steve has touched that part, but just want to add a little bit. So yeah, exactly. Recognizing that Indonesia is, the largest archipelago country in the world, right? So definitely, yeah, all of us agree that Jakarta, has the best healthcare services, right? And I believe I'm from Siloam, right? We have the market in Jakarta and also the market in Bali, right? And in those in both cities, I would say they could do the insurance communications easily, right? But the challenge would be when expats, let's say, they wanna go to to Sulawesi or to Papua or to Ambon or wherever it is, right? Yeah. So they need to realize that here in Jakarta you can see hospitals everywhere, but if you go to rural area, again, reset your expectation, right? Yeah. Because maybe in 4 or 5 villages, they will only barely have one doctor for all of them, right? Just to be frankly honest with all the experts listening to this podcast, right? So just be mindful of that, right? So let's say if you wanna go to to Sulawesi, right? To let's say to Manado, diving there, right? So yeah, you can have there's a Siloam Hospital Manado there that you can rely on, and with that one, right, with that hospital. That way also that you need my insurance can be used there. If something emergency happens, then from medical perspective, from financial perspective, then I'm all good. So yeah, that's the thing that I think expats need also to note that they're not only in Jakarta, they will be tempted to go somewhere else because this country is beautiful.
Absolutely.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only agree. It's one place to live, Jakarta, but also, of course, Greater Indonesia. And it all has to do with expectation management, right? Where you realize things are a little bit different. The further I go from big city, Jakarta, it's even more so and different from where I'm from. And there is a certain need for personal responsibility, right? If there's an emergency, ambulance services and traffic conditions might not be the same, and you might rely on yourself, on your network a little bit more, and to come to accept that, right? To just realize that it's a little bit different here. So some people really see it as a risk factor. It's a dangerous place to live. But again, it all has to do with management, right? So if you have pre-existing conditions, or you would like to have certain guarantees in place, that you know where to go in an emergency, or you know that there's a continuation of care. Again, it's a personal responsibility to set up that network. And the first step is to listen to a podcast, something like this, before you make that move, unlike you did, huh?
Yes.
There we go.
That was supposed to be a pre-recording secret. I did no research.
And even you landed on your feet. You're very knowledgeable, and it's wonderful that you take your time to share the knowledge with us. I think it's
Yes, thank you.
I think when you have the plan to relocate to Indonesia, is you contact EMC or someone like ST. Well, there are not many like ST because she gives really highly personalized care, and it's such a big advantage if you can ask all your questions to someone who is as knowledgeable as Esti. And I guess, she will touch on the topic of healthcare and will lead you in the right direction. I mean, I also don't know all the answers, right? But I know pretty well where to look for those answers.
Yeah.
And that's the same with Esti. She knows where to look and she knows how to guide you. And that's exactly what we do at Good Practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of our family's mantras, we moved here 2 years ago, and one of our mantras is to, just kind of roll with it, be flexible. But I was teasing SD that it did help having a friend and helper point us in the right direction. It made a really big difference.
Yep.
So personally, thank you for that.
Thank you.
SD, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
Well, it's been very informative night, and I hope you also listen and learn a lot. And I would like to thank you, our panelists, for coming tonight on your busy schedule, for agreeing to explain about what is available in Jakarta. Thank you, really, and thank you, Saskia, knowing then there is a help when you have anxiety and anything with mental health. And of course, to our very good friend here, Dr. Steve Graf, thank you for coming to talk about the healthcare and the services that Good Practice also offer. And lastly, the most important to say thank you to is to my very good friend, ex-client, forever loyal, EMC supporter, Carrie Gersnier, who is the mediator for tonight. Thank you, Carrie. And with that, we would like to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and all the very best to 2024. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for
Bye.
listening. We'll see you next time.